Disquiet Gods by Christopher Ruocchio is the 6th Sun Eater book and probably my most anticipated book of 2024. I was so amped to get my hands on this, and it's gonna be a polarizing one, I feel, for Sun Eater fans, but in a good way. I think everyone will respect the ambition behind Disquiet Gods. It just may not be some people's cup of tea. Let's get into exactly what I mean here. So this is a story that has, of course, centered around Hadrian Marlowe, the half-mortal, the Sun Eater. But I'm not exaggerating when I say Disquiet Gods is the most Hadrian-focused book of the entire Sun Eater series. It's a bit odd because typically as epic fantasy stories go on, even in the first-person POV, the focus widens on a larger cast of characters who are introduced and we watch them evolve and grow, especially because a central character or characters can go through a whole lot of their development and just not need the same level of intensely close narrative scrutiny. Of course, it's not unheard of, but is at least strange, notable, remarkable, you may say, in my experience for a sci-fi epic on book 6 to say half the side characters. Let's just look really intently in on the mind of a man who is in his later stages of life. Almost in some ways kind of a look back on the journey of Hadrian so far as a whole. There's even reflections at the beginning of this book to highlight how different he is than where he was at the beginning of Empire of Silence. Deliberate decisions to showcase for us, the reader, just how much Hadrian now has changed from who he was at the beginning of Empire of Silence dominate the early parts of Disquiet Gods. Probably the most overt example is him striking someone in an inferior role for stepping minorly out of line before him, whereas of course at the beginning of Empire of Silence we see a substantial scene of him bending over backwards to avoid having any form of physical disciplinary action taken against someone who is slighting him in a far greater way. Long gone is the naive, ambitious, yet annoying in some ways Anakin-esque beginning for Hadrian, and now it feels like we're following a conqueror in retirement. The Napoleon in exile of space. Really highlights how crazy Hadrian's development as a character has been throughout this series, where at the beginning of the books, of course, I was obviously most reminded of Paul Atreides and Anakin Skywalker. By book 6, it feels far more apt to compare Hadrian to Admiral Adama from Battlestar Galactica. Keeping it as spoiler-free as I can for book 6 in a series, yes, Hadrian is in exile. He is in hiding, avoiding the ramifications of his slight against the imperial family.
You better watch your mouth or I will slap the shit out of you.
And more so than any other point in his journey, it seems that Hadrian is trying to form together some kind of actual life for himself. Where we've seen him in hiding before, it more felt like the focus was on him trying to heal and process. In Disquiet Gods, it seems Hadrian is actually deciding to instead live a life and find some form of stability. And there's something I really want to talk about, but I can't because spoiler concerns for a book just coming out. But there is something introduced here to really be like, yeah, Hadrian is in his old man phase. Those who have been wanting to see earlier familial ties from Empire of Silence finally get folded back into Hadrian's wider journey all these centuries later will either be satisfied or frustrated, but two of the major familial strings plucked at the beginning of this book really do set the tone for Disquiet Gods not only to be about Hadrian, but about legacy and family. There is a criticism to all of this though, and that's that Christopher Ruocchio isn't exactly subtle with much of this. Sometimes when I'm trying to read into the themes and establishing, notes for the symphony of a book I'm about to get into, I'm worried that I'm misreading things. Ruocchio is a very clear signaler, which is fine because we're seeing this story through the eyes of Hadrian, who's a bombastic feller. It just still gets a bit grating to me when we have things said about how Hadrian is disquiet. Because yes, he's the Disquiet God too, do you see? That's not a diss on the title though. I think Disquiet Gods is an amazing title, and I enjoy the fact that the titles of the series, at least in my interpretation, are reflective of, yes, the story, but also in some way Hadrian's momentum throughout that book. If you're on book 6 of Sun Eater with me, though, you're probably just saying, like, indeed, Daniel, Hadrian has a bit of gravitas and is kind of sassy. Duh.
Insightful.
Another criticism I do have for Disquiet Gods, I really wish wasn't still an issue with me in Sun Eater, and I think will hamper me on rereads as a whole for it. The pacing here can be messy. There are well over a dozen scenes in this entry alone that I was begging the book to slow down and let me ruminate in the events happening, get even more luscious with the descriptions, or even breaking certain things into multiple scenes and just taking its time, especially as we get into some of the more high concept stuff going on for the mythos and lore that's revealed here. And this wouldn't be as big a problem, but this is a Sun Eater book where I actually did find a section in the earlier half to really need some cutting down. So for Disquiet Gods, the pacing is the weakest quality for me, and I feel like it could have been rewritten, reworked in some ways to have the reading experience be substantially smoother. In fact, this is probably the first Sun Eater book where I was unengaged for a somewhat notable section in the book. And I guess one last little append to the criticisms here. Interactions with Hadrian, they can still, if her character goes a certain direction, end up being something that in hindsight, pretty engaging and enticing if the right dagger is slipped in. If that's not the case, it's probably going to be the worst part of the whole series coming back to. I'm not a fan of what's going on with Hadrian and pretty much at all. Unfortunately, Hadrian continues to just talk about spoilers throughout this book for the next book, and we know some things will go poorly there. If you haven't read Sun Eater, Hadrian, this is a memoir, essentially, we're being recounted, and so many points throughout the series, I've been like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen here, right before Hadrian goes, and this is how that actually is going to go down in about 5 books. Fortunately, though, from here, we are going into just superbly high praise for various aspects of Disquiet Gods. I think there certainly will be a subset of Sun Eater fans who are upset with how much the Star Warsian aspects of the broad structure of the narrative are widely gone. The straightforward good versus bad empire pew pow shoot fight is here, but to a severely lesser extent. And instead, we are embracing the odd. The focus here is way more on the foundational 2001ian, later stage Dunian, Twin Peakian, David Lynchian features that have also been prevalent throughout all of Sun Eater. And with the moral complexities that have been set up in the Sun Eater universe, it kind of feels like when Napoleon escaped his exile and returned to the battlefield and started new wars, same vibe when Hadrian is brought back into the Cielcin War. The wake of the all-consuming end picks him up again. There's absolutely a yeah, but billions are probably going to die. Oh, God.
I'm sure it will be fun for the people that are going.
Yet in that very comparison, you can see how my expectations were subverted with Disquiet Gods, because this didn't turn out to be about some great war general returning and their performance on the battlefield. And instead, this is the most spiritual and insightful Sun Eater book yet. It's far more about Hadrian confronting ghosts of his past's failings and trying to find some form of resolve, purpose, and resolution in a game where he's undeniably simply a pawn. It might be my favorite character journey in science fiction at this point. If book 7 turns out to be terrible, I could regret saying this. As it stands now, though, this Anakin to Adama arc for someone who spouts Shakespearean-esque dialogue while rebelling and partaking part in the system, being scientific and it truly is a more mature Hadrian we're dealing with now. We even feel like he understands the value and purpose of life more than when we left off with him because of what he's trying to cultivate in his new exile. There's a new way for your heart to go out to this man, because while he is centuries old and so far beyond a simple human at this point, you see seeds sprinkled on top of that rock that show he's not simply just his mission. He is still Hadrian underneath the half-mortal. This incredible growth from being comparable to Attack of the Clones Anakin to now Adama, yet not feeling like just another pinhole version of either of these two, and distinctly standing on his own feet and feeling more like an ancient Greek hero. Editing Daniel here. Yeah, it's pretty obvious I have a protagonist crush on Hadrian upon editing this video. I don't know what to do with this information either. It's a little gay. Burmese! Do you see these? They're made from 100% recycled plastic. Burmese buns! That's because Burmese is a lifestyle brand that mixes style, adventure, and sustainability by donating 10% of every purchase to cleaning up the oceans. Yeah! They work with all types of swimming occasions. The beach, the pool, surfing. That's a Burmese time! And they provide UPF 50 plus protection. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but I'm excited about it. And they dry like super fast, apparently. Dry. Choose from 4 different lengths: the short, the classic, the long, and the board short, all of which offer a back pocket key loop and are made with sweat-wicking, anti-chafing, anti-odor technology to stop the stank. And while Burmese is known for a wide range of men and children's swimwear, they also provide a variety of bottoms and tops and accessories. So for any fathers out there, if you want to match your little man, you can just go ahead and buy a set. Adorable! So check out Burmese by clicking the link in the description down below and use my code Daniel20 to receive 20% discount, and you can feel somewhat good knowing you're taking a step towards a healthier planet, though there is still a whole lot to feel bad about. Don't feel too good. Burn me buns! Oh, and real quick, if you would like to see Kayla and I's thoughts, commentary on Rebel Moon 2, it's up on Patreon. He's gonna do Old Boy. Do it. There it is. Now do the side shot and watch her fight down the hall.
There we go!
Netflix made a claim on the video to the point where I'd have to get like legal to release it at all here on YouTube, so I'm really sorry about this, but you can join us over on Patreon for $1, and you'll be voting on my next read, getting vlogs from us, and watching me review a piano. But all right, back into the review. Yeah, I will say, unless book 7 just turns out to be a big wet Hadrian's gonna probably be my new favorite science fiction protagonist. I'd also just like to add a couple last minute thoughts here from post-editing Daniel. Also big compliment for the Lovecraftian horror into body horror shift for the overall horror that happens here. That's borderline like Hellraiserian in a couple of ways. Big kudos to that. And I really struggled. I had this whole section about the villain I cut out because it was a little too spoilery. But in terms of having a villain that resonates with this more reflective exploration in Disquiet Gods works to outstanding effect. And I wish I had seen some of the things revealed coming with them. And in terms of presence on page, it's the best Sun Eater's had, and maybe one of my favorite of the year. And I can't say more. God damn! Which takes us to talking about the most difficult part of Sun Eater to get into without spoilers for Disquiet Gods: lore and world building. If the pacing of this book did suffer, it was for the benefit of understanding the true mechanisms of Disquiet Gods, because this book, well, it is Hadrian focused in its narrative. That narrative is almost Silmarillion-esque in its devotion to exploring the origins of the universe, the beginning, whys, and hows of how we got to where we are in Sun Eater. Fortunately, I can talk about in detail, though, maybe my favorite angle to all of this lore exploration we're getting to the Sun Eater universe, and that would be Christopher Ruocchio's exploration of faith and meaning in a world universe where you are getting answers to the purpose of it all in seeing creators. I have seen some people say, and this happens all the time to authors who are openly religious, that Sun Eater is just going to be like a Christian thing. First of all, it's fine if it is. As someone who doesn't have faith, it doesn't bother me at all if someone wants to bring their religion into a book and explore it in some interesting ways, as long as it's done in a way that does fit what is set up so far for the series, which is absolutely the case here. Sun Eater is overtly addressing that this is a chosen one story. So what does that mean? It means there is gods and things beyond that are trying to influence and manipulate and have given Hadrian what allows him to be the half-mortal. Sun Eater is fully embracing, leaning into answering questions a lot of other series don't, of spiritual implications of encountering a chosen one, especially for established religions in the universe. And I don't need an author who's writing that to be religious or not, but I do need them to have interesting insights into faith. And so yes, Christopher Ruocchio, as someone who has openly spoken about his faith, really brings that in nicely here without ever crossing any line for me personally. Shifting from there to just like easier to talk about fun stuff for Sun Eater as a whole, it is throughout its 5 books up to this one already been great about continuing the tradition within science fiction of taking cutting-edge sci-fi concepts for the time and taking them to extremes and, pulling them into the narrative to earn the title of science fiction, which most sci-fi books that want to do. I just really enjoy that Sun Eater is doing it with the most cutting-edge scientific stuff that's going on now. I want to talk about spoilers. I want to talk about spoilers for this one. If you thought Hadrian could not be hurt worse than he's already been hurt leading up to this point in the series, I hate to say, but in an all new way, we get to see him just kicked while he's down. And for someone who's the half-mortal, it's not really a blessing anymore. It's fully a curse. There is a case to be made that Hadrian is a bit of a Mary Sue, but there is also a case to be made that that's not good for him. One of the burning questions I've had for the end game of Sun Eater, though, actually did manage to get addressed here, and that is just how is all of this setup in terms of the worlds, peoples, cultures that have been built toward in Sun Eater are going to come back and play at the end. In hindsight, when the series is done, is a lot of it going to feel like filler, or is there some real intent and pattern to this web that is being spun before us? I'm happy to say Disquiet Gods aggressively answers that question, and it's surprising, even just here for the penultimate book, how little fat there is leading up to this book. Culture after culture, peoples after peoples, and even the commentary and discussion of the various genetic things going on with this medium late stage point for the human race become integral to the political setup and intrigue and court drama angles that have always been in Sun Eater and of course are still prevalent here. For any epic within speculative fiction, it's important that if your world building is going to take up a bulk of the time, it absolutely should come back into play for the end game of the narrative. Wheel of Time is an excellent example of that. Yes, there is 14, 15 books getting into tons of different cultures, but they are brought together to work with or against each other in the last battle. There's not a last battle happening here yet. It's more that the cracks within the Sullan Empire are growing, and the political maneuvering to try and fix or worsen that is making all of the setup of the various factions we've had that are supposedly aligned or actually aligned with Hadrian the Empire are vital to what is happening now. Oh, I'm a happy bee. Book 7 seems fairly well set up to me to conclude a lot of this. And I'm weirdly like double invested in that being the case, because not only do I want this series I'm loving to have a strong finish, but like I've gotten a whole lot of you invested in this as well. So if it falls off, I feel like I'll be like, oh, guys, I'm really sorry. Apparently you all are my books now. But this has just been your latest book review here on the channel. Let me know what you've been thinking of Sun Eater in the comments down below. Was it for you? Is it not? Have you already picked up Disquiet Gods? Let's have a discussion. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. Look up behind!